I read a book recently and I enjoyed it so much. It gave me such a fresh perspective on psychology and like self-help in general that I really want you to read it. I really recommend it, but you know, as far as recommendations go, I know it's pretty likely that you won't listen to me and you won't read the book. So in an attempt to convince you to read the book, I want to talk about the 3 things from the book that really stuck with me. I hope it inspires you to read the book as well, or at least research the concepts in more detail. So I think it'll be just as helpful to you as it was to me. So the book I read was The Courage to be Disliked by Fumitake Koga and Ichiro Kishimi. And can I just say, before reading this book, despite years of consuming self-help and self-development content, I had never heard of Alfred Adler before. I had no idea who Adler was. Apparently, he was a psychotherapist, doctor during the time of Freud, and he actually attended weekly discussions with Freud to discuss, psychoanalysis topics. And apparently, Freud came to dislike Adler, which I guess, it makes sense why Adler isn't talked about much. Mainstream psychology mostly sides with Freud, and Freud and Adler kind of clash in terms of their concepts. Their concepts of psychology are pretty different, and Freud kind of came to dislike Adler because Adler kept on disagreeing with Freud's ideas. After reading this book and discovering who Adler was and what Adlerian psychology was, I was so angry at mainstream psychology for not talking about Adler, not even mentioning his name anywhere. Even though apparently there are quite a few self-help books that talk about Adlerian psychology and concepts without giving him credit. I just think it's a shame that no one's talking about Adlerian psychology. And it's a shame because if the book, The Courage to be Disliked, didn't become as popular as it has become, then, most people wouldn't know who Adler was, and they wouldn't know about Adlerian psychology. So I'm a little frustrated with that, but nonetheless, I'm happy that I came across this book and I actually read it. It's not a long book. It's a pretty short book, so I think if I convince you enough to read the book, you won't be bored. It's in a dialogue format between a young man and a wise old philosopher. So anyway, the first thing that really stuck with me is the concept of all problems are interpersonal relationship problems. And the philosopher in the book, but basically Adler, says that any problem that you might have is related to interpersonal relationships. And that's quite a bold statement to make, which is why it stuck with me. It really stuck with me because we don't really think that our problems are related to other people. We think they're mostly personal problems. Basically, the philosopher says, if you're the only person to exist, if you're the only human on Earth, right? Would you have any of the problems that you currently have? Would you be concerned about your body, your weight, your height, your income? Would you be concerned about rent, bills to pay, money? Would you be concerned about what other people think about you? Would you be concerned about work, friends, dating, romantic partners, like, would you have any problems? You wouldn't. And any problems that would appear from being the only human on Earth would be because you're the only person on Earth, right? So any problem that would appear from being alone is because you're lacking interpersonal relationships. It's because you don't have other humans to help you, I don't know, farm the land, hunt animals. The problems you would have would be related to survival, and you would have those problems because you don't have other humans to help you with your survival. So all the problems that you currently have exist because of interpersonal relationships. And it's either because you are avoiding interpersonal relationships, you're afraid of vulnerability or rejection or judgment. You might have feelings of inferiority when it comes to friends, colleagues, romantic partners, family members. So any problems that you currently are facing are due to your relationship with other people, how you view other people. The concept that every problem is an interpersonal relationship problem kind of opens up your mind to thinking about your problems in a different way. So if you have a certain set of problems that, you're consistently dealing with that are hard to solve, it might be because of your relationship to other people. And, thinking about how you view other people, how you view yourself in relation to other people, might be an important factor to actually solving your problems. So that was like the first thing that really stuck with me. So knowing all problems are interpersonal relationship problems really helped me realize in which ways I'm creating these problems for myself. How am I viewing myself in relation to other people? How am I viewing relationships in general? How am I viewing work relationships, friend relationships, intimate relationships? And how that might be creating these problems for myself. So I think it might really help you as well. The second concept that really stuck with me is teleology. And the concept of teleology is almost like polar opposite to the concept of etiology that we're pretty much all familiar with, that comes from like the Freudian perspective on psychology. So I'm pretty sure you're familiar with like the concept of, your behaviors and mental health in the present are affected by your traumas, your childhood events, your environment growing up as a child, right? We're all kind of familiar with that approach of psychology. And so basically etiology says that there's always a cause and an effect. So there's always some event in the past causing an effect on your present. And opposing that is Adler's concept of teleology, which is basically saying that humans have conscious or unconscious goals, and that all the behaviors and actions and emotions and thoughts that a human has always benefits them, in the sense that they're always aligned with that goal or goals that the person has. So in this case, whenever you're doing something or feeling something or saying something or whatever, it's always in alignment with a goal that you have. It's always benefiting you in some way. Because we're so used to etiology, it's kind of hard to be convinced of that, because how would depression benefit me? How would anxiety benefit me? How would all these fears I have benefit me? Like, there's no way that these negative things in my life are benefiting me in any way, right? But the thing about goals is they don't have to be conscious goals. you might have a lot of unconscious goals that are basically influencing your behaviors and thoughts and feelings so that they are aligned with those unconscious goals. So in the book, there's an example of the young man's friend, which has extreme agoraphobia, who basically isolated himself in his bedroom. He's a grown adult, still living with his parents, unemployed, no income, no friends, no social life. Basically just living in his bedroom, not being able to leave the house at all because of his agoraphobia and extreme fears and anxiety when he tries to leave his house. So in this example, in terms of teleology, the philosopher pretty much says that he has unconscious goals that he's trying to achieve by isolating himself in his room. And those goals could be, getting revenge on his parents for not giving him the type of love that he needed or wanted as a child. It might be to get his parents' constant attention and love, even if it's in the form of like constant worry and frustration for their children's situation. Or it might be to avoid his life tasks and responsibilities of, finding a job, finding a place to live, paying rent, paying bills, finding friends, finding romantic partners. He might be trying to avoid all the hardships and responsibilities and possible failures and rejections he might face if he were to start living his life, right? So even in cases where, a person has mental health issues, fears, anxiety, depression, fatigue, lack of energy, lack of motivation, apathy, these things might exist because they benefit the person in some way, even if it's unconsciously, right? So that person might have unconscious goals that are achieved by feeling, thinking, acting, living in a certain way. So that really resonated with me because I think in my case it made a lot of sense. I mentioned before how, I was unemployed for a long time. I'm living at home with my parents. I don't have an income. I'm not really social. I don't have a lot of friends. And reading that example of the young man's friend who didn't leave his bedroom, even though that example was extreme, I still resonated with it because when I think about it, I also have similar unconscious goals to that young man's friend of avoiding my life tasks, avoiding the responsibilities I have, avoiding all the possible pain, uncertainty, failure, rejection, hard work, time, effort that could go to waste if I were to take responsibility for my life, if I were to actually do the things I had to do. So thinking in terms of teleology, whenever we act or feel or think a certain way that we consciously don't want to experience, we could ask ourselves, in what way do these behaviors, these actions, these thoughts and feelings benefit us? What unconscious goals could we have to achieve through these behaviors, thoughts, and feelings? For example, do you ever feel super tired, like just a lack of energy, clarity, focus whenever you say you're going to do something that you know you should do? Like, I don't know, let's say you're putting off doing something for a long time and you wake up and you're like, you know what? I'm just going to do that thing. I'm just going to do the thing that I said I was going to do for a long time now. Do you feel a wave of like fatigue and like exhaustion and just like a lack of energy and focus when you have that intention of doing the thing. Because that happens a lot to me. Like whenever I say I'm going to do something, I suddenly don't have the energy to do it. I suddenly feel so tired and exhausted, and I suddenly feel so distracted. And because I feel so tired, I usually, convince myself to do that thing later because I just don't have the energy for it now, right? So even in cases like that, if you ask yourself, what could be the unconscious goal that I'm trying to achieve? How would this lack of energy, fatigue, distraction, and brain fog benefit me? You might find out, just like me, that you're actually feeling so tired and distracted because you're trying to avoid doing that thing. So the body is actually creating these symptoms of fatigue and lack of focus to avoid doing the thing, because that's your unconscious goal. Your unconscious goal is to not do the thing. So even though you consciously say you want to do the thing, that's not your goal. So the feelings that you're experiencing of lack of energy, fatigue, are actually benefiting you, are actually helping you to achieve the goal of avoiding the thing. So now I'm really trying to apply the concept of teleology into my own life whenever I'm, distracted, or whenever I'm acting opposite to what I consciously want. Sometimes I gain the awareness and consciousness to realize that I'm doing these things, I'm being so distracted and indulging in bad habits because they're benefiting me, because they're helping me achieve my unconscious goals of avoiding my life tasks, avoiding responsibilities. And the third thing that really stuck with me is the concept of community feeling, especially like horizontal relationships that Adler talks about. I really resonated with the concept of community feeling because it's actually a pretty spiritual approach. I was pleasantly surprised to learn that Adler had a more spiritual and philosophical approach to psychology and social relationships, in the sense that his definition of community is everything that exists. His definition of community is all living beings as well as all things that exist. It's the entirety of existence. It's the entire world. It's the entire universe. It's everything. Adler basically encourages people to have that community feeling of belonging to this community, feeling like you belong in this entire existence, feeling like you are an integral and vital part of the whole of existence, realizing that you're just a small piece of thread in the tapestry of life, of existence. And, even though you're a small thread of the tapestry, you still have a purpose. You still belong. You're still a part of the tapestry. So you're meant to be here. You're accepted. You're a part of all this. So I really resonated with the community feeling concept. And related to that, I really like the concept of horizontal relationships. The philosopher pretty much says, all of our current relationships are usually vertical relationships, in the sense that there's a hierarchy, whether you're conscious about it or not. If you feel insecure about yourself, you might be looking up to someone. You might feel like you're inferior to them. Or on the flip side, you could be feeling superior to someone. You could be feeling above someone, which, is actually just a way of compensating for feelings of inferiority. So they're two sides of the same coin. But anyway, if you're feeling above someone, if you feel superior to someone, you might be looking down on them. The philosopher pretty much says that we're socially conditioned to view relationships vertically, even with like family members and romantic relationships. So regardless of what relationship we're in, we're unconsciously creating a vertical relationship where we're either looking down on them or we're looking up to them. Even though we're socially conditioned to have vertical relationships, the concept of horizontal relationships really resonates with my ideals of, equality, equity, fair treatment, respect. So I really liked the concept of having horizontal relationships where you're treating the other person as an equal instead of a superior or inferior. You're basically treating everyone else, regardless of who it is, as an equal. You're not looking down on them. You're not looking up to them. You're treating them as an equal, even if they're different, even if they're older than you, younger than you, a different ethnicity, gender, regardless of who they are, you're treating them as an equal, as a comrade. That's also something I really liked. So when you start having horizontal relationships instead of vertical relationships, you start seeing other people as comrades instead of enemies or competition. Because when you see other people as competition implies winners and losers, right? And if you're trying to win, that means other people are losers, or they're your enemy and you're trying to, defeat them. You're trying to win something. So vertical relationships always have resentment, hostility, and like a lack of trust and respect. If you can see other people as comrades, as, friendly people, as allies, it would increase your sense of peace within yourself. You would feel more peaceful. You wouldn't try to prove anything to other people, right? You wouldn't try to constantly win this competition that you've created in your mind. You wouldn't try to always win in arguments or discussions. You wouldn't always try to be right. You wouldn't always try to appear superior. You wouldn't always try to win. You wouldn't always try to put other people down. You wouldn't be constantly judging other people or judging yourself in comparison to other people. So, all in all, like having horizontal relationships and seeing other people as your equals, as comrades instead of competition or enemies or rivals or as superior or inferior, would really help to increase the harmony and balance and peace in your life. That would end up changing your entire worldview. That would end up changing your reality and how you experience life. Your reality and life would end up being a lot more enjoyable, a lot more beautiful, a lot more loving and full of love. And, even if people end up hurting you, you have the power to walk away. You have the power to distance yourself from the people who hurt you, but still have the confidence and trust in people in general to create new friendships, to form new relationships with people, not based on the hurtful past, but based on your present, based on love, right? Yeah, so those are the three things that really stuck with me when I read the book. Did I convince you to look into the book, to read the book? I hope I did. I really recommend reading the book. There are a lot more things in the book than I just talked about. These three things aren't the only three things the book talks about. they're all interconnected, but there's so many different concepts that provide a much needed alternative. After reading the book, I realized that Adlerian psychology is a much needed perspective and approach. Even though it's pretty different to Freud's concepts, I think it's just as necessary. Just because they're different doesn't mean they don't complement each other. Just because you have traumas and things you need to heal doesn't mean you can't make empowered decisions in the present. It doesn't mean you don't have any power to change it, right? You can have traumas and a painful past and still have the power to make different decisions. You still have the power to choose a different life. You always have the power within you to live the kind of life that you want, right? But in order to access that power, we need the courage. The title says it all, really. The title itself really resonated with me as well. We really need to have the courage to be disliked, to live life freely according to our own desires and in alignment with our purpose for being here, for being a part of this whole. And once you have the courage to be disliked, you would have the courage to live your purpose. You would have the courage to live your life the way you want to live it, and you can start to live purposefully, intentionally, as a part of the community of this entire universe. You might have more clarity as to what your purpose is, as to how you want to serve the community, how you want to help other people. And having the courage to be disliked along the way would help you to fulfill your purpose, regardless of what people might think. If you already read The Courage to be Disliked, please let me know what you think. I'm really curious to see what you thought of the book. And if you haven't yet, please do. I really wish mainstream psychology and self-help mentioned Adler a lot more. I personally think that philosophy, spirituality, and psychology are very interconnected concepts. So I really appreciate how Adler combined the three in his concepts. I think the modern spirituality, philosophy, and psychology communities would actually benefit from Adler's concepts if they talked about them and researched them more. So I hope to see more of Adler's concepts become mainstream in the future. But anyway, let me know what you think. If you enjoyed our talk, please consider subscribing to my channel and watching my other videos. I would really appreciate it. I would love to continue talking with you. And that'll be all for today. I hope to see you soon. Thank you. Take care. Bye.